Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to part 2 on the history of Studebaker Trucks. If you missed the first part or need a recap, go check out part 1. Now, let's get back to where we left off. The United States came through World War I with a sense of accomplishment. And by 1919, horse-drawn vehicle production was curtailed, except for farm wagons. In 1920, Studebaker sold the wagon works to the Kentucky Wagon Manufacturing Company of Louisville. Everything pertaining to wagon and carriage manufacture was turned over, including existing inventories of wagons. The remaining equipment, facilities, and personnel were shifted to automobile production. In doing so, Studebaker became the only wagon maker to successfully transition to automobiles. Up until 1920, all Studebaker automobiles were being built at the former EMF factories in Detroit. Erskine's pre-war plan to expand the South Bend factory had to be put on hold until the end of the war, with facilities only partially complete. In March of 1919, construction resumed, and by April of 1920, Plant 2 began the production of automobiles in South Bend. Plant 2 was an industrial showpiece where mostly everything required to assemble cars was fabricated on site. The Detroit plant continued to produce the majority of Studebaker cars, but plans were made to eventually move a larger share of automobile assembly to South Bend. Beginning in 1918 and continuing into the next decade, Studebaker built its reputation around a line of six-cylinder vehicles that vitalized its growth. The Big Six was the deluxe series. It had a 60 horsepower engine and was offered as a tourer, sedan, or coupe. The Special 6 series was similar but was priced lower with a 50 horsepower engine. The Light 6s were slightly smaller and economically priced with a 40 horsepower engine. Growth with Erskine at the helm was exceptional, and the popularity of the 6s was evident as 51,000 automobiles were sold in 1920, 65,000 in 1921, and 150,000 in 1923. Commenting on the 6s, Erskine said, "These are the cars that made Studebaker famous." Throughout the 1920s, Studebaker flourished. Their well-built, American-made, stylish, affordable automobiles were quite popular with American people. Sales were good, and the Studebaker company was looking to the future. In 1926, the Detroit plant was finally relocated to South Bend. The man in charge was Harold Vance, who had been general sales manager since 1923. With the move, he was promoted to vice president for production and engineering and elected to the board. That year, another important addition was made to the executive staff. Out in Los Angeles, a gentleman named Paul Hoffman had built the largest and most successful dealership in the country and was invited to South Bend to become vice president in charge of sales. Several years before Hoffman assumed the vice president position, he had gone to South Bend, having won a sales essay contest. During his visit, he was introduced to J.M., who asked him if he would like to know why Studebaker had become so successful. When Hoffman replied to the affirmative, J.M. told him it was because they always gave more than they promised. After a brief pause, J.M. added, "But don't give them too much or you'll go broke." With profits coming in, Studebaker looked to expand its established line of models. Seeing the success of Ford's Model T and responding to consumer research and requests from dealers, Erskine felt Studebaker should enter the low-price market, and accordingly had engineers develop the Erskine. This handsome little car, introduced in 1927, had a 40 horsepower engine, delivering 60 miles per hour and 30 miles to the gallon, but it was never the success it was hoped to be. A short engine life and a significantly higher price tag than its competitors added up to poor sales, and the Erskine was discontinued within 3 years. Albert Erskine's venture in the opposite direction would prove to be more fruitful. 1928 was a great year for Studebaker. The poor showing in the small car market the previous year would be offset by a development just coming into fruition. Concurrent with the little Erskine, Studebaker had been working on his first entry into the 8-cylinder market. Chief engineer Delmar Barney Roos, who had joined the company in 1926, was given the task of building a big 8-cylinder car, and he gave Studebaker a genuine classic, the President 8. These large, well-appointed cars utilized Studebaker's first high-compression engines, and they were noted for being spacious, their style, and speed. As the model continued into the early 30s, its lines and amenities became even more refined. What worked out great for Studebaker was that with a price tag around $2,000, they were within reach of those looking at mid-priced cars. Noted for performance as well as style, Presidents established over 100 records for speed and endurance, some of which stood more than 3 decades later. That same year, another company's misfortune turned to Studebaker's advantage. The prestigious luxury car maker Pierce Arrow was desperately short of capital, and approached Erskine with a proposal to merge. Realizing the prominence this would bring, he agreed and the deal was closed. Within a year of merging, Pierce Arrow sales increased 78%, largely due to Studebaker's expansive sales and distribution network. Studebaker and the rest of the country approached 1929 stable and prosperous. As the 20s came to an end, America and Studebaker had enjoyed immense success. 1929 began on a financial upswing, reaching a peak in late summer, when the stock market topped out at an all-time high. Then, early in October, stock prices began to drop. By October 22nd, banks and corporations nervously called in outstanding loans. Stockholders reacted in panic and quickly sold their holdings. Within 2 days, on Black Thursday, the New York Times carried the headlines, "Prices of stocks crash in heavy liquidation. Total drop of billions." In an instant, the nation's wealth seemingly vanished. Studebaker had weathered many recessions and depressions in its history, and Erskine was confident the company would survive another. Even as conditions worsened, he continued to express his belief that the market would eventually right itself and business would return to normal. Early on, he was encouraged in the sentiment by positive reports from dealers. To keep the corporation strong while conditions improved, he authorized payment of substantial dividends on Studebaker stock. When things failed to improve, he continued to be optimistic and pay high dividends. To further aid in recovery, he decided to re-enter the low-priced car market. Still convinced, even after the failure of the Erskine, that small cars would make Studebaker. Erskine acquired a design developed for Willys Overland, which ultimately was designated the Rockne 6. A subsidiary corporation was created to manufacture and sell the Rocknes. The new car was named after the famed Notre Dame football coach, who worked for Studebaker conducting motivational sessions for dealers. Coach Rockne died just days after completing an agreement to become more involved with Studebaker promotional efforts. His widow agreed that the new car be called Rockne. The Rockne sales performance was pretty good for a new mark, but it was the Great Depression and Studebaker had significant financial problems unrelated to the Rockne. Underestimating the impact of the Great Depression, Studebaker president Albert Erskine inadvertently led the corporation into receivership in 1933. On July 1st of that year, Albert Erskine, discouraged and broken, took his own life. Harold Vance and Paul Hoffman of Studebaker and Ashton Bean of White Motor Company were appointed by the courts to be trustees in receivership. Their approach to recovery would prove to be much different than that of their predecessor. The first order of business was to inform the public that the company was still alive. Their release statement said, "Studebaker carries on. The Great South Bend plants of Studebaker, closed since the announcement of the bank moratorium, reopened Tuesday, March 21st. And open they did. During April, more than 3,800 cars were built and the company showed a profit of $20,000. While this was certainly positive, it would not salvage the business. Debt was in the millions and running an auto firm took millions more. In order to increase money on hand, Pierce Arrow was sold for $1 million cash. Vance and Hoffman then sought to further boost capital by going to the banks. The banking firm of Lehman Brothers, long associated with Studebaker and seeing that the company and its new management had the ability to carry on, facilitated reincorporating under Delaware law. With the liquidation of the White Motor Company stock, Vance and Hoffman finally succeeded in building their working cash to almost $6 million. On March 9, 1935, Studebaker Corporation became the only automobile manufacturer to ever be released from receivership. Vance then became chairman of the board and Hoffman became president. Paul Hoffman and Harold Vance ultimately rescued the company, but much of Studebaker's momentum had been lost. In 1936, it introduced a line of cab-over-engine trucks, and in 1937, the smoothly contoured Coupe Express pickup premiered. Studebaker built quality trucks continuously from 1929 to December 1963. The Champ pickup, Zip Van postal trucks, Transtar gas jobs, and medium-duty diesels were its last commercial products. Studebaker also built bus and fire engine chassis. However, Paul and Harold knew restoring Studebaker to its former state was going to be quite a challenge. They knew if they wanted to make a complete recovery, they would need to vastly increase production numbers. And to achieve those numbers meant Studebaker had to get back in the low-priced market it had failed twice before. Studebaker aimed to produce a new, inexpensive car to be known as the Champion, and a large portion of ready capital was devoted to its development. In 1939, Studebaker introduced the low-priced 6-cylinder Champion, and it was an instant success. The Champion sold alongside the larger 8-cylinder President and 6-cylinder Commander. Sales over the previous year nearly doubled, with 72,000 units being built. By the end of the year, Studebaker was once again the largest independent automaker in the country. By the end of 1939, prosperity in America had begun to improve as the country steadily emerged from the Depression. Employment was up and optimism was returning to daily life. At Studebaker, the resounding success of the Champion had given the company new life. Throughout the rest of the world though, the situation was grave. Hitler's armies were rolling over Europe while the Japanese consumed Asia and the Pacific. Foreign orders for war supplies were again coming into South Bend. In 1939, Studebaker sold large numbers of K33-ton trucks to France, Belgium, and Holland, who adapted them to military use until the fall of the continent in 1940. A large number of these Studebaker trucks were captured by German forces at the Battle of Dunkirk, and many of them were later converted to run on synthetic fuel. China too needed trucks but purchased chassis and fitted their own cabs and bodies and used them on the Burma Road. Even with tensions mounting as they were, most Americans opposed the idea of becoming involved in a foreign war. Congress too resisted any suggestion of involvement, but prudently increased defense funding. With production costs rising and certain that civilian car production would be reduced, Vance actively sought military contracts. When the US government approached several automakers seeking proposals for military trucks, Studebaker created a truck based on their M series, and early in 1941 was given a contract to begin production. In December 1941, as the next year's models were just coming off assembly lines, Peace for America finally ran out. That is part 2 for you guys, and the final part for Studebaker will be out soon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Before you leave, be sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and comment below. What did you think of part 2? Fall in love with our February sales as we have 10% off all in-store purchases. And if you sign up to join our Chrome Club, the discount gets bumped up to 15%. We also have 15% off grill inserts, 15% off stainless visors, $75 off classic style bumpers, 15% off train horns, set of 10 lug nuts 15% off, and free freight on all Roadworks exhaust products. If you want to stay up to date on the new content coming your way, check out the Chrome Corner Wednesdays at noon with our host Dave Coleman. Thanks again guys for watching. I'll see you next time, and remember, if your rig don't shine, you don't know jack.